Hello everyone, new day, new video, new chapter. So I hope you guys tried previous videos and thank you for the feedback and also the questions and some ideas. I'll try to incorporate those for the future videos. So today we are going to see how we can secure our microservice. Because last time, if you remember, we created microservice to get the profiles, but anyone can call that service and get profile information. That should not happen, right? So those are sensitive data. Those are secure. Those has to be secured, and only authorized people should be able to access those data, right? So how we can secure microservice? So there are multiple ways to do that, but I don't want to go round and round and round. You can find those information in the internet enough, right? Basic authentication and so many things. But the most widely used authentication technique for microservice is JWT and oAuth2. So JWT means JWT. So I'll go in a later for those, and most commonly used thing is oAuth. So I'm going to teach you what is oAuth and how to use oAuth for secure microservice. But this will not be, I have to declare this will not be an in-depth oAuth2 video, right? So if you are trying to learn oAuth2 from this video, no, this is not the video for that. But I'm going to teach you the basic of oAuth and what it does, plus how you can implement your own oAuth server, right? So maybe this give a little insight to you, but if you never heard the oAuth2, then you may need to read some things or watch some other videos to understand what oAuth2 is, right? So I'm going to give you the very basic principles, right? So before we begin, so let's see what oAuth2 does, right? So if you take oAuth2, it's a protocol. It's a protocol we use to do the token-based authorization. So what the token-based means, the whole intention of oAuth2 is not to disclose username and password for applications and other websites. So it's a way of delegate access without sharing credentials, right? It can grant client to perform certain action on behalf of user. The best example, let's say I have some camera installed on my home, or I have the smart bulb, right? So I need to send those information to Google Drive or iCloud, right? But I don't want to give my username and password into my light bulb or the camera, right? Because if you have 100 device, then my username and password will be in 100 places, right? So in that case, in case I want to change my username and password, it will be ridiculous, right? And also if I want to sell some device, or if I want to throw some device out, right? So then my username and password, I have to revoke it. It's a really cumbersome process. So what we can do is we can tell Google Drive, hey, this smart camera is owned by me, or this bulb is owned by me. So let it to access Google Drive on behalf of me, right? So what's the difference between giving a username and password and giving this oAuth2 based token based authorization? The difference is, so whenever you want to revoke, for example, you can set expire time, right? You can tell I am granting this for 1 week, 1 month, or sometime like that. So there are multiple advantages doing that. And also when you do, like if you go to certain website, you can see like login with Facebook, right? Login with Google, login with LinkedIn, login with GitHub, right? So what they does is, so they use your credential, GitHub credential, the Facebook credential to access their system. So that brings to a second point, authentication versus authorization. This is a topic where most of people get confused, right? Even some senior people get confused. What is authentication and what is authorization? Authentication is who you are. Authorization is what you can do. That is the simplest way I can think of, it can remember. Authentication is who you are. Authorization is what you can do, right? For example, you will see authorized dealers, right? For Apple, they have authorized dealers. For a Samsung, they have authorized dealers. Authorized dealers means they are authorized to do it. That means they are permitted to do it, right? So that is the easiest way to understand. Anyway, so back to the topic. So technically, oAuth is not intended to use as authentication, right? So oAuth is not there to authenticate user. User has to be already authenticated in order to get the access token, right? But most of the time, almost all providers implemented these together. So a lot of people confuse oAuth2 is an authentication framework. No, oAuth2 is authorization framework. If you need authentication, you can use something like OpenID, but oAuth2 is not there for that. However, we can implement both. So, and also we can have a third-party OAuth providers such as Google or Facebook or LinkedIn or GitHub in order to get this authorization process. So now we know little basic about what is oAuth2 part. There are a few vectors in oAuth2. So first we have a resource owner, right? And also we have authorization server, and also we have a client, and also we have a resource server. Let me explain this in a very simple way. Resource owner is most probably you, is a user, right? User is own the resource. And authorization server is the entity which grant this, which handle this authorization process, what to do and what can do and what the roles and all those things. Client is the one probably app, right? For example, let's say you are trying to access krishantha.com, right? So krishantha.com need to log in, right? So krishantha.com is the client. Now I'm going to use your Google ID or a Facebook ID to authenticate you, right? So what I'm going to do is log in with the Facebook or log in with the Google. So then authorization server is a Google server, right? So resource owner is you, right? So now you are giving, through the authorization server, you are giving access to the client, right, to access the resource server. The resource server is the place where we keep the resources. So now resource server is going to verify the token you give through the authorization server back, right? So this is how this works, right? There are certain keywords, certain names, right? So one is access token. Access token is nothing but is a random string which does not make sense when you just reading it, right? So if you read the auth token, it doesn't make any sense. It is not something reverse string or something, doesn't make any sense. The refresh token is auth token will, access token will give you for a certain period of time, let's say for 1 hour, right? So when 1 hour is expired, then the client can use the refresh token, get a fresh auth token, right? It can keep refresh it, right? So otherwise, every 1 hour you have to give a username password to the particular site to authenticate you, right? So you don't have to do that since you have a refresh token. And a client ID and secret. So client ID and secret is the way it identifies the app, right? So when you register app, let's say I have oAuth server. So you want to authenticate your users or authorize your users through me, right? So then you have to register on me. Hey, I need to use you. Then I'm going to give you a client ID and a secret to you, right? So then when the request comes with those client ID, then I know, okay, this user belongs to this app. So scope is the allowed permission. It can be read or write. It can be anything. It just is, you define it. So JWT, otherwise JWT, is a widely used mechanism to pass information between services. For example, let's say I have authorization server. So this particular user authorized through me. So now I need to give the user's permission, what user can do, and email address or any other information belongs to user. I can give those through this JWT. So JWT is support for encryption, so it's very secure. Generally, this is how it's work. So you have a client, right? We discussed client could be a website, right? Client request resource owner. Let's say you come to the krishantha.com. So krishantha.com asking, hey, can I access your account, right? So resource owner. So resource owner talk to authorization server and grant this client, right? So now authorization server issue a token to the client, right? But keep in mind, authorization server does not disclose your credentials to krishantha.com, right? So now what krishantha.com can do is it can pass this token to the resource server. Hey, I got a token, he's trying to access you. The resource server is going to validate this token from the authorization server to ask whether this is a valid token, is it expired or not, and so on and so forth, right? So then when resource server tells this is a valid token, then resource server release the resources. This is how this flow works, right? So let me explain again in simple way, right? So let's say client is a krishantha.com, it's a website, right? So let's say krishantha.com has a separate API cloud, right? So you are granted to access this API cloud, but krishantha.com need to know who you are and what you can do within this API cloud, right? So the Krishanta.com, otherwise the client, otherwise the app will asking you, hey, can you show your authorization, right? So can you grant me to access this API cloud on behalf of you, because you are granted to access this API cloud, but I am not granted. I can access behalf of you. So how you going to do it? So then a resource owner talk to authorization server, hey, this is my username and password. Please grant this client to access this API cloud. So now, based on the configuration given with the roles and everything, so authorization server will send a token to the client, and the client pass this token to the authorized resource server. The resource server validate this token from the authorization server. So this is a very generic flow. If you take the specific flow, right, so there are multiple grant types. So for example, authorization code, client credential, implicit, password, device code. But if you take the particular specific flow, authorization code flow, this is the widely used flow, granted flow with the microservices, right? This and the password credential. I'll explain what's the difference, right? So let's take particular specific flow, right? So this is the where you can see authentication and authorization separately, right? So let's get this client Krishanta.com, right? So sending a request to authorization server, let's say you're going to log with the Google, right? So then Krishanta.com for sending a request to authorization server, hey, I want to access this, I want to access particular resources, right? So then authorization server asking resource owner, which is you, the user, hey, Krishanta.com want to access your account, will you give the access, right? So this is now, it prompt the small dialog box to enter username and password. That is the way you authenticate, right? So now you authenticate with the resource server, right? So you say, okay, I'm allowed you to give the access to Krishanta.com, right? That's why when you go with the login with the Facebook or login with the Google, you will see the small text saying Krishanta.com want to access this. These are the permission it's going to get. Read your account, delete your account, delete your file, read your file, and so on and so forth. So now resource owner says, okay. So now owner was authenticated, right? So now it's in the code, right, to the client. Now client pass that code back to the authorization server and asking a token, right? Because this is just a code and I need to have a token. So now authorization server give the token back to the client, right? So now client can pass this token to the resource server. So now resource server can validate this token from authorization server, right? So when the token is upon validation, then resource owner going to release the resources, right? This is the authorization code flow. So now you can see the most important thing here, the client, or in the case Krishanta.com, won't see your username or password, right? So whenever you give the username, because Krishanta.com, what it does is it direct to you to the authorization server, right? So whenever you say logging with Google, it directs you to the Google, right? So then Google login page comes and your username and password only see by Google. Client won't see. That's the most important thing. That's why this is the most secure way, right? So you don't have to disclose your username and password for each and every website, right? So you can keep your username and password with the Google or the whatever the provider you decide, then so they will only see the access token. So it's very secure because no one sees your username and password other than your particular server. But there is other flow called password that is also using widely, right? So the password flow, the difference is client take your username and password and send that username password to authorization server, right? In that case, user won't see authorization server login dialog box, but it will see your app, in that case Krishanta.com page to enter your username and password. Then Krishanta.com take it and send it to authorization server. That's a difference between auth code flow and the client password flow, right? So now we know how to deal with how this auth works, right? Let's see how we can implement a very simple auth server, right? Today I'm going to implement a very simple auth server, but in the next video I'm going to implement the real production quality auth server using a database. Okay, so let's implement a simple auth server. For this I'm going to use again other Spring project, a Spring Boot project. So it's very easy to implement a Spring auth server in a Spring security auth server using Spring Boot, right? So what I'm going to do is my artifact name. So as a dependencies, I need web dependency, and I need cloud security, and I need cloud oAuth2, right. So I need the 3 dependencies. Okay, so let's go to our POM file and see what are available, right. So we have startup web and oAuth2 and the security, and we are using the latest version, which is the 1.2.1.2, right. So this is good. So only thing what I need to do is now I have to go here and tell enable auth server, enable authorization server. That's it, right. It's a simple. Now we have authorization server, but so where are the users, right. So we don't know any of this. So what you need to do is, I'm going to do it in 2 steps. First, I'm going to implement the authorization server using the property file. Then I'm going to move into the code, right. So then you will see the difference, right. So and also I'm going to explain you what is the difference they introduce in the latest security, Spring Security, right. So change this to YAML. So first I need to set the port. Let's say I'm going to set the port to 8282, right. So then I need to set the username and password, spring.security.user.name. So let's say Krish, password Krish123, and I'm not using this password anyway, so you don't have to try this, right. So I'm going to use 2 roles, admin and user, right. So now this is okay. I have a user for this. I'm going to first hard code the user. So then I need to set oAuth2 properties. For that I need to set the client ID, security oAuth2 client ID, let's say mobile, and also I need to set the client secret, right. So pin, and I'm going to use token valid in seconds. So let's say my token is valid for 1 hour. Also I need to set authorized grant type, authorize, and also I need to set the scope. So I'm going to give the read. This can be anything, so you can write any scope you want, right. So now I'm ready, right. So now I have a basic setup. So oAuth2 works, right. So remember I explained you, right, when you register app on the oAuth2 server, it gives you a client ID and a secret. In this case I'm going to hard code, right. So in the next video I'm going to show you how you can move those things to database, right. Okay, so we are ready with the basic setup. Okay, so now I'm okay. I'm going to run this application. In this case, we didn't give any context path, so it would be the basic standard context path. So let's go to our REST client, and I'm going to create a new request. It's a GET request. Let's say oAuth token request. So my URL would be localhost 8282, right. So I didn't give any context path. It would be directly token and oAuth/token. So this is my URL, right. Now if you try to access this, it will say phone not found. Oh, it should be oAuth, right. So now it will say unauthorized, right, because you are not authorized to access this. So I'm going to use the basic oAuth here. So what you need to put here, so whatever you added in this context, right. So whatever your client ID and the secret, so mobile and the pin, right. So mobile and pin. Okay, so now I have granted to access. Now it says method not allowed, right. So we need to this supposed to be a post method. So now it's a invalid request. So I'm going to step by step. So here now I need to add what are the information I need, right. So form URL encode. So my grant type, I'm going to access grant type as a password, right. So I need to access the password grant type, and username is Krish, right. Password Krish123, right. So let's try again. So now you will see you get a response, right? So you have access token, you have a token type is a bearer token, we can talk about later. The refresh token, this is the one I told, right? So when the access token expired, so access token going to expire in a 3599 seconds, that means the full 1 hour, right? So after it's expire, we can use the refresh token to get the new access token. Right, you can see here I have a read and write scope, right? How we get the read and write scope? Because this client is granted to have a read and write scope, right? But we can set the scope here. We can ask, hey, give me the read scope. So now you only see the read scope, right? Access token for the read scope, right? So let's give the write scope. See that access token is starting with the 82. So now you get the new access token for the write scope. But you will see now it has 3599 seconds, right? So now if you remove the scope again, so you will see you will get access token expired in 3533 seconds. Why? Because we send the same credential and asking the same scope, so access this authorization server cache this token for 1 hour, right? So because it's the same user, right? So if you execute again, it will get lesser second, right? So you see 3512. The reason is they cache this token for 1 hour because this token is a valid, right? So how we can validate this token now, right? So what we can do is we can create a new request. Let's say check token request. Okay, so here URL would be same URL but with the check token endpoint, right? So check token, and we can pass a token here. Check token equal, we can pass the check token, and token equal, we can pass a token here, right? But the moment you try to pass the token, let's say we pass some dummy token, so it will tells you you are unauthorized, right? Because true. So you have a two options for that. Either you can authorize this one, right? So either you can authorize this one with the same username and password, I mean a client secret and credentials, right? So mobile and the PIN, right? So in that case, it will pass this unauthorized part. Then now it's a forbidden. Forbidden mean you are not allowed to access this resource, right? So the reason behind this, because when it comes to the Spring latest update, Spring security, we need to tell here to whom we are going to give the check token URL access, right? So check token access is, I'm going to say, hey, permit all. Right, so permit all mean you can access this resource even without sending a client ID and a secret, right? So let's try this. Okay, so if we check now, so now we'll say invalid token. It's obvious, right? So we send some dummy token. So let's copy this token. It's the real token, and paste it here, right? So now you will get all this information, right? So now you can see here, so you have, it says active token expired in this time, and username is Krish. So these are the authorities I have a role admin and the role user, and also this is my client ID and these are the scopes, right? I didn't granted any permission, so these are the informations I have. So they extracted this information from here, right? So now we know how it works, right? So since I said the all, right, so even with no authorization this should work. Okay, yeah, because I said the permit all, right? So now this is a little bit ugly because this is not something like a production ready, right? So anyway, if it's a production ready, we have to move into the database all those details, but yet this is not a very production quality application because anyone can see this property file and anyone can extract this information. So let's see how we can move this information into the configurations, right? So I'm going to create a new package. This will be really quick. So I'm going to create a package called conf, right? For this, I'm going to create a class called oAuth server configuration. Okay. So I need to annotate this with configuration annotation. Okay. So now here, so I'm going to extend this from web security configuration adapter. implement from authorization server configurer, right? You can do it in a different way, right? So this interface authorization server configurer has an implementation also called authorization server configurer adapter. So Java don't support for extend from two classes, right? So therefore we can't extend this from two classes. So for that, what you can do is you can create a two different configuration class on your project, and one extend from the web security configurer adapter, another one extend from the authorization configurer adapter. So why we need to extend from the web security configurer adapter here? Because when it comes to the Spring security, the latest version, so we don't have access to authentication manager by default, right? So authentication manager comes with the web security configurer adapter, so we need to get that authentication manager. I'll show you that, right? So now since we come from the interface, it's asking us to implement the methods, right? So these three methods I'm going to implement. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to make these names shorter so that it will be easy to understand, right? Okay, so now I'm going to create my clients here, right? For this video I'm going to create this client in memory. How I'm going to do that? Client dot in memory dot with client. So client is mobile. Let's say to make sure this is working not from the property file, let's give a different client, right? So secret is web pass, scopes read, right? Authorization grant type I'm going to give just these two, right? So I'm okay with this. I'm not going to set the validity period, so it will take the default validity period, right? So server configuration is done. So now I need to go to create the users. So I'm going to create a new class called user configuration. So again I need to annotate with configuration annotation, and here I'm going to extend this from global authentication configuration adapter, right? So then I'm going to override its method called init. Okay, so here I'm going to create my users, right? So auth dot in memory authentication dot with user Krish, password Krish pass, so now I'm ready with that, right? So I create one user, right? So if you want, I can create a new user. So what I can do is create and again I'm going to copy and paste this right up to here and just change a little bit. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to use the second name as Suranga, right? The password is sur pass, and he's not a manager, he's a user, right? So and he can delete records, right? So now we have two users. Okay, so we have two users now, right? So we are good. So now we configured users and now we configured author servers, right? So if you're not sure, we can delete all those information from this. I'm not going to delete, but I'm going to, instead of the yeah, let's delete this, right? So now I'm going to restart this service because we did a lot of changes. Let's restart the service. Okay, so we started. So now let's see, we can create a token from here, right? So now it's not a mobile, it's a web, right? So what was the password we given for the web pass? Execute this. Now it says no return for response. It's a 401, right? 401 mean unauthorized. That means this cannot authorize me. Okay, so we will see, if you go to the console and see illegal argument exception, there is no password map for the ID null. Okay, So I think I know the reason. The reason behind this could be when it comes to the Spring latest security versions, and when we access to the Spring Boot version 2, so they removed no. So I think the reason behind this, so the password encoder, because there is a default password encoder with the latest version, but when you give the plain password from your code, right, so in memory authentication, when you give the plain password, so when you try to verify the password, it cannot verify because this is not an encoded password, right? So we need to set the password encoder here, probably in the both cases, because client ID and the secret and the passwords for both cases, we need to use the password encoder. So what we can do is you can say password encoder equal password encoder factories dot create delegate password encoder. So this is the default password encoder but the problem here, we cannot access this because this is a plain password, right? So we not encoded this password, so Spring Boot trying to decode the password because it can decode because this is not an encoded password. So what we can do here, so password encoder dot encode and this one, right? So I think now it should work, but let's fix it here as well in the same time, so I don't have to come back. Okay, so I think I'm good now. We'll see. Right. So let's try to get the token. It says unsupported grant type. So that means we send the grant type as a password. This worked before, so but now it's not working. This is the reason I told you, because I saw in this documentation they are saying we don't have access to security authentication manager from directly as a bean. So up to here, up to this latest version, so what we could do is we could simply auto wire the security authentication manager, but not anymore. So what we need to do is, that's why I extend the web configure adapter. So what we need to do is we can create a bean here. Authentication manager, right? So authentication manager, let's say bean, right? So return super dot authentication manager bean, right? And we need to throw an exception. Okay, so now this should be public, right? So now it's good. Now we can auto wire authentication manager. Right, so we're good. So now here in the endpoint we need to send who is my authentication manager. Authentication manager is my authentication manager, right? So now, because the problem here, it do support password credential. This is error a little bit misleading. It do support password grant type, but the problem is there is no one to validate this password, right? So that's the problem. There is no manager to validate this credential. It's a little bit misleading, but it's fine. Okay, so good. So now we can it's a invalid grant because the username and password wrong, right? So what I gave is Krish pass, right? Yeah. So now I have a token, right? So now I have a token. So let's take this token and see whether this token is supposed to validate. I think it is not, and even I don't need to copy and paste here. Yeah, it is not valid because the same problem, right? It's not permitted. So what we can do here in the security section, so we can say security dot check token access. You can give like last time permit all, right? So you can give like this. In that case, you don't need even access token to even you don't need even client credential and secret to access this. But it's a invalid token, obvious, because we restart the server, it's in memory. and you go here and copy the token and paste the token here, right? So it's give all those information again, right? You can see write, delete and read. So now this is for Krish, right? So let's try, because now I have a read, delete, write, delete and the read, right? And let's see if I try with Suranga, username Suranga, pass, right? So it cannot grant, because I think again I made the mistake here. I didn't encode his password. Yes, I didn't encode his password, so I need to encode it. Password encode this, and let's try run again, right? So remember again, so last time I got read, write and delete access, right? So let's get the token for Suranga. Invalid bad credential. So let's go and see SUR pass, not the SURA pass, right? So now I get the token, right? Again, draw your attention here. So can read, can delete and can write. So now when I check this token, it will tell you you can delete, right? You can't delete anymore because you are not granted to delete, right? So now you see how this works, right? So this is, but I mean, you can deploy this into production if you have one client and the few set of users, because no one can read this information, because this is within your code. But this is not the right way to do it, right? So right way is we can put this token store and everything into the database, right? MySQL or whatever the database you're choosing, right? So the next video would be, I'm going to teach you how you can write the production ready enterprise authentication server, authentication and authorization server using Spring Security. Okay, so till that, subscribe to this channel if you're not subscribed yet, and also share this video on your social media, so more people will reach this video and more people will learn. Okay, so all this effort to teach people and teach people who you want to learn. So share this video. Then I'll see you again in the next video. Stay safe, take care.